In the summer of 1985, my mother, sister, father and myself moved into a rural farmhouse in central Kentucky. The house was not in the greatest of shape, but it did the job. Even though my father had served his country for 22 years, he never took the time to attend college or even a vocational course. So when he left the service, his options were few when it came to employment. He found a job fixing copy machines in the small city of Elizabethtown, and my mother found work at a clothing store. Needless to say, both my sister and I, who was 5 years older than me, were latchkey kids, and not out of the norm in the 80s. We were renting that house at the time, and our landlord was an old, crotchety man. He did little to nothing to help keep the house up, but given the low rent and the fact we were just below the poverty line, it was acceptable. There was nothing extraordinary about this home. A basement, the middle floor and the attic that had been converted to a master bedroom. As any 11-year-old, the basement was not my favourite. Always dark, always spooky. Typical. The washer and dryer were there, along with our large freezer. It was segmented by a partial cement block, as if someone wanted to do something with it but never got around to finishing the entire wall. The house had no air conditioning and a furnace that worked some of the time. We couldn't afford anything more than fans in the summertime and space heaters in the winter. The house had been rented and left over and over again prior to us moving in, and after that first year it became clear why. My experiences started on a Friday afternoon. Both my mother and father were working, my sister was at school. As for me, I was home trying to recover from a flu that no one else in my school seemed to have. At the time, I got sick. A lot. Many nights I would have chills and a fever, but by the next day I would be alright. My mother took me to the doctor repeatedly, but they could never really pinpoint what the problem was. The windows were open and the 2 box fans were going that hot July day. I was lying on the couch, watching one of our 3 channels that we could pick up with our roof-mounted Radio Shack antenna. As I lay there watching some old show, static began to overtake the television screen. Not bad at first, but then basically made it impossible to watch whatever horrible show was on at the time. I raised up, irked that I had to move. As the static became unbearable, both visually and to my ears, I made my way over to the large oak cabinet that contained the behemoth set. That was the day, the moment when I realised that this house would change me and I would never be the same at all. I began messing with the wires on the back of the set, checking connections and becoming worried that this snafu would prevent me from watching my afternoon cartoons. And in 1985, G.I. Joe was not just entertainment, but a way of life. The TV was a kit set. By that I mean it came in pieces, and my father literally put it together and installed it into the oak cabinet that took up way too much floor space. As I proceeded with my examination, I moved to the front of the TV, pulling out the control panel and tried to make any adjustment that might bring it back to life. I leaned over and turned the set off. I was just now staring at it, pondering my next move. As I looked at the blank, dark screen, all I could see was the reflection of the living room behind me. The light from the curtainless window made my surroundings in the tube all that much more clearer. Everything appeared normal behind me at first, as my main focus was on my need to watch my upcoming cartoons. But right at that moment I noticed something out of place in that reflection. A man was sitting on the very couch that I had just left. The fear shot through me like a bolt of electricity. I spun my head around as fast as I could, to see nothing. I stood up just as fast and scanned the room, my heart racing. How did someone get in here without me hearing or even seeing them? I cautiously made my way through the house, checking first my sister's room, then mine. I slowly walked through the kitchen as it was the gateway to the rest of the home, including the basement. I skipped that door, going instead to the one that led up to my parents' room. I quietly moved up the stairs, trying to take as much in as I could. Still I found nothing and no evidence that anyone was there. I finally made my way back to the kitchen and the basement door. I opened it with just enough space to flick on the light. Once they came on, I pushed the door open and peered down the stairs. That was enough for me. As I came back into the living room, I looked around and saw no one on that couch. Just the chairs and that same overgrown TV. Sitting back on the couch, I started, to the best of my 11-year-old brain could muster, to think about what exactly I had just seen. He looked to be in his late 40s in a black suit, black hair, long face. He wasn't looking at me, just looking forward with a blank stare. I tried to compose and reason with myself. I was a giant horror movie geek and I had just watched Poltergeist for the 50th time that past weekend. It was a trick of light and shadow and my imagination, I figured. It didn't make sense that anyone could come in the house for one, but also why they would just sit down, get up and leave. The ghost was out of the question as nothing had happened in the few months that we had lived there, and besides, that was just fiction. My final thought was that I simply wasn't seeing what I thought I saw. Once I had come to that conclusion, I was able to steady myself and refocus my attention to what really mattered: cartoons. I walked over and pushed the power button back on, and lo and behold, I had picture and sound. Just then the phone rang. I hate to admit it, but I jumped just a little. It was my sister telling me that she was going to a friend's house after school, and to let Mum know. I said okay and hung up the phone, not willing or wanting to know if my sister had anything else to say. Leaning back on the couch, feeling I'd just accomplished something great by returning to my programs, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was my bedroom door and it was slowly opening. Getting up, I made my way over, only to jump back when the door suddenly jotted open as if someone on the other side had grabbed the handle and decided to make a quick and forceful entrance into the living room. I took 2 or 3 quick steps back. I could see directly into my bedroom. Once again, nothing. The calmness I had obtained from my prior investigation had suddenly vanished. My heart rate was up, and although I was sick, my sinuses had become fairly clear from the rush of adrenaline. I called out half-heartedly. No noise, nothing came from anywhere. Of course it didn't, nothing was there. Stepping further back, I was amazed at myself and the level of fear that had taken control of me. I took a deep breath, attempting to readjust my brain and to find a rational explanation of the non-robber ghost into a door that up to a few seconds prior had never done that before. I decided that stepping outside was a good idea. I spent about 10 minutes playing with my dog and just looking around. The inside of the living room could be seen through the screen door, but I decided that I would take one good look around. Laughing to myself, it dawned on me that there couldn't be anyone in the house because my dog would have barked. She barked at everything from cards to a leaf. Needless to say, she was alert to the point of being irritating. After walking around the outside of the place and coming to my senses, I made my way back into the kitchen and grabbed a Coke and a small bag of chips and sat myself down in front of the idiot box. Then came the moment where I could no longer explain anything. Above me, from my parents' room, I heard distinct footsteps, loud footsteps moving from one end of the room to the other. Back and forth they went. I stared at the ceiling, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. Instead, they moved closer down the stairs. I moved to the doorway of the kitchen and listened as they proceeded to stomp down the steps. I was frozen, waiting and watching. And then, nothing. Screaming as the attic door flew open was my next plan of attack. Not a great way of defending oneself, mind you, but that was the best I could come up with in that moment. I began to ponder whether or not I should call my mom at her place of work. However, I couldn't imagine what would take place if I told her to please drive 20 miles back to the house because her son had basically lost his damn mind. Also, if she had, she would have likely told my dad, and that for me was a non-starter. He was not one who liked to be bothered with, well, just about anything. So my options were shrinking as my level of fear was rising. Moving quickly back to the living room, but with my eyes still focused on the attic door, I didn't know what to do. Making my way back to the couch, but this time paying no mind to whatever was playing on the TV. I called out again, asking who was there. When I received no response, I realised that I was basically whispering. I tried again, this time with more force in my words, asking who the thing was. When I got nothing back, the thought that my 11-year-old mind had come up with was simple. I was crazy and therefore there was no stopping it now. Staring at the screen door directly in front of me, I began to wonder if this was real. Perhaps I wasn't going crazy and perhaps there was something there, and if that was the case, I didn't want it to be around. I grabbed the phone and called my best friend. He had gotten home having completed his day at school. It was a Friday and I told him I was feeling better and I should stay the night at his house. Hell, the entire weekend sounded pretty good at this point. He asked his mum and she said yes. He then told me that he and his dad would pick me up in about an hour. Unfortunately, that hour would be too long of a wait. I went to my room, packed some things and grabbed some Nintendo games and wrote to my mum, telling her that I was at my friend's house for the weekend. The explanation sounded pretty mature for the time. I even told her to have a good weekend and to contact me if she needed anything. There was no doubt in my mind I wasn't waiting around for another 2 hours before she got off work, not to mention the 30 minutes it took for her to drive home. Rocking myself back and forth looking for my friend's father's car to pull up our overly long driveway, I was growing more and more anxious. But I knew my trauma, real or imagined, was coming to an end. Sitting there, even with the TV on, I noticed that everything had become eerily quiet. Box fans were on full blast and the commercial on the TV was very loud, but nothing seemed right. The air felt still. Everything outside of the main noises of the electrical equipment was oddly quiet. It was almost bizarre. I turned off both fans and then the television. Suddenly I was overcome with all the hairs on my body rising up as if a low electrical current was going through me. And then it happened. I heard the one thing that I absolutely positively did not want to hear. Jonathan. It was a slow whisper but loud enough to clearly make out whatever it was saying. My breathing became so heavy and my heart was beating so fast that it was almost impossible for me to hear anything other than those two things. And then I heard it again, louder than before. I grabbed my belongings that I was planning on taking with me and I ran. I ran all the way down the driveway, leaving the doors wide open. I stayed there for nearly half an hour before my friends showed up. When they got there, I requested they go down the driveway so that I might check the doors to make sure I locked them. His father did so without one complaint. After the weekend passed and I returned home after school on the following Monday, instead of having a peaceful existence, whatever the thing was, it systematically began to haunt every member of my family. My mother kept having things move around or go missing. My sister would hear whispers in her pillow and began to spend more and more time with her friends, basically moving in with one of them near the end. And my father, well, he would often see someone out of the corner of his eye. He would say he saw someone in the property, and that one night in the basement while he was working on something. That instant was the start of our move away from that house and Kentucky itself. Although he would never specifically say what happened, when it did, he began to plan our move. As for me, it called to me. I had a horrible and disturbing nightmares always taking place in the basement, and the shadows would appear on the wall from time to time. Many years have passed since we lived there. The house has been remodeled from what I understand, and many people have came and went. No matter where I have lived, I will never forget what happened there. That instant is why I became a researcher, to try and find out what was causing this, and other incidents just like it. Even after all this time, when it's a hot summer day and I'm alone, I often put earbuds in and listen to music, if for no other reason than to make sure I never hear my name being called from the shadows again.